Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today to this launch of a dossier on carbon emissions reduction strategies for Qatar, which is a collaboration between Middle East Council for Global Affairs and Earthna, Center for Sustainable Future. My name is Mu'izz Ali. I am a research and policy lead at Earthna. We run the Earthna Summit, as you probably know. And today we have a lineup of authors of chapters in the dossier. And just for a little bit of background, this dossier was originally Middle East Council's idea. I think give credit where credit is due, to launch a collection of policy briefs on the topic of decarbonization strategies for Qatar. So we organized a workshop in September last year, and we invited various experts to contribute policy briefs on topics that they are currently working on related to decarbonization strategies for Qatar. And the outcome of the workshop was a contribution by each expert who attended, a short policy brief on their work, and with significant and actionable policy recommendations for the government or for various sectors on what they can do to support the decarbonization efforts for Qatar. The policy brief is made up of 3 sections. The first section is on Qatar's economy and the debate around carbon emissions reductions. The second section is on alternatives and low carbon technologies for Qatar, which looks at industry, looks at hydrogen and the desalination sectors. And then the final section is on carbon markets in Qatar and the MENA region. And I think the main message from the dossier is that it will take a lot of effort to decarbonize and meet the Paris goals. And it's only through concerted efforts that we will be able to achieve this. Qatar has taken significant steps in the past to decarbonize the economy, especially in the oil and gas supply chains. And we felt like convening these experts to provide or to contribute to potential solutions around these decarbonization efforts would be useful. And so, with no further ado, I would like to introduce Nadir Kabbani, who is the co-editor of the dossier and who is behind the significant effort that was put in to make this dossier happen and to meet the launch day today at the Earthna Summit. So once again, thank you for being here today, and I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Mu'izz, and thanks to Earthna for working with us and with the Middle East Council on Global Affairs, not just in terms of putting together a dossier, but in terms of all the activities leading up to this. We started off with a roundtable discussion last year, followed by a workshop where people came together, presented their findings and their research, and really the idea was to look at the policy implications of the research. What does the research tell us, or what should they want to communicate to policymakers in Qatar, based on what the research was telling them, and so the result was with much effort, of course, from colleagues like Hamad Abu Hawash and the excellent team at our communications unit. We have a very nice, I think, publication that provides hopefully some insights into decarbonization strategies and policies for Qatar. You can get a copy of this outside, and there's a link that you can click on to access all the chapters in the dossier. And very much thanks to Earthna for inviting us to organize this panel as part of the Earthna Summit this year. What we're going to do is maybe have a kind of a conversation about some of the work that's being done, that was done, and that the authors are doing currently on the issue of decarbonization in Qatar. But then we want to also open it up for questions and Q&A from the audience. So thank you for joining us today for this conversation. So I'd like to just introduce the panel for today. Doigo Sever is a postdoctoral associate and instructor at Carnegie Mellon University. Alexander Sotzer is the director of the Climate Action Center of Excellence at the Gulf Organization for Research and Development. Marcelo Contestable is the chief economist at the Qatar Environment and Energy Research Institute. And Dabi Al-Muhannadi is an assistant professor at the College of Science and Engineering at Hamad bin Khalifa University. So thank you all very much, not just for joining us today, but for all your engagement and hard work in helping us put this publication together. What we're going to do is first I want to give a chance for everyone to talk a little bit about themselves and introduce themselves more deeply, as well as their work. And then we'll kind of go through a second round of everyone talking a little bit briefly about their contributions to the publication. And finally, kind of reflections on their work for climate energy policy in Qatar more generally. Doigo, let me start with you, please. Tell us a bit about yourself and your work. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for being with us in this early morning session. So this is Doigo. I think the easiest way to describe what I do would be in like two main clusters. One concerns energy politics, energy transition. As you might guess, my background is political science and international relations. So what I'm interested in, not just an energy source in its bubble, but rather how it interconnects different dynamics at the global, regional, or local levels. Like what are the domestic dynamics, how it connects with the global distribution of capabilities. And I'm investigating all of these, especially with connections to energy security and energy transition. And specifically as part of it, my focus has been for the last 10 years maybe on nuclear energy, because I think this is a very interesting topic which most of the time includes very biased information when you check the literature or the research, depending on the position of the institution or the author. But I was very curious about the why question. So we have all these information, but which sometimes says, oh, this is an awesome nuclear energy resource, or like an awful energy resource. But then why are we still talking about this? What are some pushing factors or constraining factors that lead the countries to end up with certain nuclear energy policies? So I've been investigating this for the last couple of years. And in the second cluster, I would be focusing on sustainable development, environment, and climate change, especially these global discussions, how the global policies or agendas can kind of travel through different levels of analysis, go into specific local context. How can we ensure that the local circumstances, needs, challenges, people are actually incorporated to the discussion? As part of it, I'm part of a big cluster project, a 5-year cluster project on education for sustainable development funded by Qatar National Research Fund. And as a kind of personal passion, I'm also very much invested in educating on sustainable development, raising awareness, because it's all about changing the mindset and how we redefine our relation with nature and the resources that it offers us. So pretty much that would be a summary of what I do. Thank you.
Alexandra, if you could tell us a bit about yourself and your work.
Good morning. So thank you to the Middle East Council and Earthna for organizing this event and for the invitation. It's really an honor to be here with you today. I'm director of the Climate Action Center of Excellence, which was launched by the Gulf Organization for Hello? Can you? Okay. Which was launched by the Gulf Organization for Research and Development a year ago. And I joined from UNDP, bringing over 15 years of experience in climate and carbon finance. At the Climate Action Center of Excellence, or CASE, we have 4 key pillars. Yeah, we work with public and private sector to accelerate the implementation of the Paris-aligned carbon markets. With governments, we support governments to set up regulatory and institutional frameworks, which is a requirement for governments to effectively participate in carbon markets. We also have some additional support services, for example, a very recently launched A6 Assist. It's a real-time, in-person support to governments to really become ready to implement carbon markets under the Paris Agreement. Then we work with private sector. We add the carbon layer to mitigation projects so that these projects become financially viable. And we also work with a leading-edge tech platform based in the UK on carbon auctions, which now also includes a so-called A6 tracker. This is an overview of the readiness of countries, really 139 countries, how ready they are to engage in carbon markets, and if it is viable for investors and project developers to participate in a project in this country. And last but not least, we work with Rasmal Ventures. It's a homegrown venture capital manager here in Qatar, approved by the Qatar Finance Center Regulatory Authority, and also selected by Qatar Investment Authority as one of the funds accessing the 1 billion fund of funds. And we are setting up a clean tech venture capital fund to further accelerate implementation of projects around the world. Yeah, maybe I stop here, and thanks.
Thank you, Alexandra. Marcello, if you could tell us a bit about you and your work.
Good morning.
I don't hear it. Yeah.
It's on now. Very good. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marcello Contestabile. I lead economics and policy research at the Qatar Environment and Energy Research Institute. I have worked in the area of policy and economics of clean energy technology for over 20 years in different roles, in different organizations in Europe, GCC. And at the Institute, mostly focusing on Qatar and the GCC, and looking at what is not commonly referred to as the energy transition, and what the implications are for Qatar in particular. So studying pathways to reduce emissions through from energy through the development of cleaner energy technologies nationally. Also looking at how Qatar can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions associated with its exports of fuels and commodities. And very important to all this also is how Qatar can capture value from the deployment of cleaner energy technologies, both for domestic use and related to its exports. So that's all, I guess, for now.
Dabia, can you please tell us a bit about yourself and your work?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for asking me to be part of this panel and this wonderful work that we've done together in terms of the dossier and the work from you, Dr. Nanda and Wise and the team. So a little bit about myself. I'm an assistant professor at the College of Science and Engineering at HBKU, and I work in the area of chemical engineering, particularly process systems engineering. So what I do is analyze systems in terms of like inputs, outputs, how can you make them a little bit more sustainable, how can you make them economical, and then studying the impacts overall. And throughout my career, I looked a lot about carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and natural gas monetization. How can Qatar be at a cost advantage while responding to the different emission targets around the world? At the same time, looking at the whole supply chain. So we're looking, for example, in my group, into how the Qatar produces the different types of products, including fuels, what are the main shipping routes, and what happens at the exporter, so at the importer side. So we look at the whole chain from terms of importer, exporter, shipping, and the import. And in there, we look into different types of, we do a lot of analysis, including understanding the life cycle emissions, what are the biggest areas for competitive advantage for Qatar in terms of reducing emissions. At the same time, are there any areas for circularity in terms of materials? So we answer questions using those methods that would partially answer economic diversification questions, looking into ways of doing decarbonization, and assessing the impact of policies on the local production and industry, and understanding how Qatar would be accountable in these kind of chains. So that's in my research area, but my role mostly has to do with teaching at the university. So I teach undergraduate students and graduate students, and do a lot of teaching in there in terms of introducing sustainable courses. I think that's the first time I ran with Diego there. And we're looking into ways of changing the mindset of our students to think of circular economies and sustainability as a way of design whenever you're developing any new processes. That's very important for chemical engineers because historically we're kind of polluted. And we're learning what we're doing there.
Thank you so much, Tabia. And what we did with the dossier, we tried to do is, like I mentioned, ask we have a lot of people actually working on the issue of climate change and energy transition in Qatar. Qatar has actually wealth of knowledge and resources dedicated to this question. And the specific question we asked was for people involved in the dossier to kind of reflect on the policy implications of their work. What would they communicate to policymakers? And I think what we got was a very rich set of ideas that emerged from this work. And I'd like to invite the panelists kind of to each reflect on that research and what they contributed, as well as the key messages that emerged from that work. Doigo, can we start with you?
Okay, now it's working. I think with this chapter of mine, I addressed the elephant in the room when it comes to decarbonization discussions, because I focused on nuclear energy. And as I just mentioned, nuclear energy is a very kind of controversial topic, which is almost treated like a taboo or like a state secret almost, that we don't really talk. If I may include our dear audience just for a second for a question, like a small mind exercise maybe. Just concentrate for a second and try to detach yourself from our discussion. When I say nuclear, what is the very first thing that comes to your mind?
Dangerous.
Let's make it more practical. Raise your hand if you are thinking about weapons or security concerns. Okay. Raise your hand if you are thinking about energy. You see, the room is changing. What about desalination? Do you ever think about desalination? Not really, because we don't talk about this enough, and how, what could be some potential implications of nuclear energy generation for the decarbonization is not coming into picture. So before stating anything else, let me just state that Qatar does not have any publicly disclosed plan for constructing any nuclear power plant, a conventional power plant. Or this policy brief is not intending to suggest a strategy saying that, oh, Qatar has to build a conventional nuclear power plant. Then you might wonder, okay, then Duygu, why are we even talking about this? And I'd be happy to explain the reason why. With a very short overview of what's going on now. So currently there are over 400 reactors that are operable over the world. And if you collect all the reactors under construction, planned or proposed, you would see more than 500 additional reactors that are on the way. Currently, European countries are leading the production, countries like France, but when you check the projections, you see that actors like China or Russia are coming into picture. So the players are changing. If you focus on the GCC region, you see that there's an increasing interest from Saudi Arabia. You see that the UAE has just completed the final unit of their first nuclear reactor, the Baraka nuclear power plant, which is expected to generate almost 25% of their electricity generation. And it's just right across the sea. If you want to drive there and visit the power plant, not that we can, but if you want to do that, it's just 4 hours of drive. So maybe I should just reframe the initial question that I asked then. How can we not talk about nuclear energy in that regard, even for Qatar? Because when it comes to decarbonization and Qatar's strategy on that, it's a very challenging issue because it has to first think about its own domestic transformation, the whole economic diversification, what will be the national identity or national interest in the path to net carbon and net zero emissions. In the global front, what will all this transformation mean for Qatar's global role as an important energy player? There will be fading markets, there will be emerging markets, how to project all of these. And regionally as well, how to ensure that Qatar has prepared policy options, developed strategies for advanced nuclear security, nuclear safety, cooperation, and innovation. So this was the whole motivation when I addressed this topic in this one. So if I were to sum, of course, the policy brief is out there, and I would invite you to read it, and please reflect back on me if you have any questions, comments. I would love to hear more. But very briefly, Qatar's relationship with nuclear has been more on the safety or security side for so long, promoting the nuclear disarmament or promoting safety mechanisms, safety regulations, or in alternative technologies in health, food, environment. And with all of these spheres, Qatar has been engaged very much with the agency in Vienna. So it was a very good collaboration. When it comes to nuclear energy side, especially in the aftermath of Fukushima, Qatar has been very silent. But then in 2021, we heard the news that Qatar Investment Authority has invested in Rolls-Royce SMR with a 10% share. And maybe we can open a very short parenthesis here about SMRs. So SMRs, as the name suggests, small modular nuclear reactors, are considered as an innovative technology that could answer some potential fundamental issues that comes with conventional nuclear power plants, such as the construction time, such as the high capital investment cost. With these modular reactors, you can assemble them on site. You don't need that big amounts of reactors. It's flexible, and it's hoped to be, in the future at least, economically viable. But the models, the economic models, and their commercial viability is still under question. But what this means in Qatar, for Qatar, investing in such a technology is very important, not just for itself potentially, but for potential usage of this technology in the Middle East. Because especially when you check the desalination, this is why I asked about desalination, you would see that almost 65% of desalination is coming from fossil fuels. And there's a huge effort to decarbonize that whole dimension, that whole process. And SMRs are coming into picture in this one. The second thing would be the data centers and the AI initiatives that require immense amount of energy, which again connects back to the discussion of small modular reactors. So all in all, I would be very surprised to see Qatar investing in a conventional big nuclear power plant. But I think with this investment in SMRs, Qatar made kind of a reflection that it is following up the developments, following up the innovative technologies, and it was maybe like a player move to be in the global arena when it comes to new technologies as well. And if you have any further questions, I would be more than happy to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Duygu. Alexander, same question.
So I will talk about my carbon market, Paris-aligned carbon market chapter. Unfortunately, carbon markets cannot be used as a finance tool for nuclear energy. This is not eligible, not considered clean energy by UNFCCC standards. But so my chapter emphasizes the unique role of carbon finance for Qatar to decarbonize its economy and transform its society towards a more low-carbon society. So what is important to also highlight is that Qatar does not start from scratch. Yeah? Qatar has already prior experience in carbon markets through its engagement in the Clean Development Mechanism, which was the carbon market instrument mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol. And 2 CDM projects here in Qatar are currently seeking transition into the Paris Agreement mechanism. So this is a highlight. So there might be an opportunity to build on this experience and really enter the Paris Agreement carbon market strategically. But Qatar must be cautious in engaging in carbon markets, because under the Paris Agreement, Paris Article 6 carbon markets, so Article 6 are the Paris-aligned carbon markets. A corresponding adjustment is required for internationally transferred credits, credits that are transferred to a state or non-state actor. This means that these credits cannot be used toward Qatar's climate commitments. And this represents an opportunity cost for Qatar, because it reduces the domestic carbon space. And to manage this, we recommend that Qatar uses international transfer and carbon credits as a strategic asset, and authorizes transfers only if they can unlock significant co-benefits, for example, access to new to cutting-edge technology, or for strategic long-term partnerships, foreign direct investment. And these carbon credits, the value of carbon market should not be only seen by the price in the market, but also the ability of these credits to support Qatar towards a more sustainable or low carbon transition. And this opportunity and context makes the development of a regulatory and institutional framework really urgent. So Qatar needs to set clear criteria for the authorization of credits and for international transfers, eligible projects, eligible methodologies, a robust accounting framework to ensure environmental integrity and compliance with standards, UNFCCC set standards. And these standards were agreed by all parties. Yeah? The negotiations are consensus-driven, and Qatar was on the table and agreed to the standards. But we can also look at it from a completely different angle, and Qatari companies and investors could also participate and use carbon markets as a strategic opportunity to invest in technologies abroad, in international projects abroad. And for example, Qatar is considered a pioneer in district cooling. So district cooling or green building projects could be promoted by Qatari companies and technology transferred abroad. And this could be even tied to export credit lines set by or implemented by the Qatar Development Bank. And so each dollar invested by the Qatar Development Bank could generate a credit that can be used towards Qatar's commitment. This is another opportunity to consider. But in conclusion, we recommend that Qatar's engagement in carbon market is selective, strategic, and standard-driven. And by using carbon markets, carbon revenues, not just as a pure revenue stream, but also as a tool to support Qatar's transition towards a more low-carbon society, Qatar can help to shape the next generation of international climate cooperation.
Thank you so much. Marcelo?
My turn. So in my chapter, we presented selected results from broader work that we're doing, looking at energy transition pathways for Qatar. So looking at what cleaner energy technologies could be deployed over the coming decades in the country to gradually reduce emissions. And this is based on a tool that we developed. It's called an energy systems model. This is a tool that is used by many governments around the world to inform their climate change policy. And Qatar didn't have one, so we thought of developing it for the country. It's a tool of the same standard and type used by the leading governments. It has been used in the UK for more than 20 years, for example, and as we have developed this tool, we also applied it to cases that we thought were interesting. And what we're talking particularly in this chapter is the intersection between climate change mitigation policy and economic diversification policy, because both are high-level, if you like, goals of the country. So I don't know if you're familiar with the main policy documents of Qatar. So there is the Qatar National Vision that calls for turning the country into a more sustainable economic and social system. So it calls for protecting the environment, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, diversifying the economy away from fossil fuels, and creating a knowledge-based society. This, by the way, is not unique to Qatar, because if you look around the GCC, you will see similar visions and goals being set by their respective governments. Now, this is implemented through so-called national development strategies. The third and last has been released last year, and it calls for economic diversification towards specific focus sectors. One is manufacturing, one is logistics, and one is tourism. All three already exist in the country, but we're talking about developing them further, making them more, if you like, robust to the future, and therefore also making them cleaner. As far as the greenhouse gas mitigation targets of the country, those are set by the nationally determined contribution of the country. So far, it only reaches to 2030. So we don't know what trajectory Qatar will want to take going forward. We are working with the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change we're starting to work on this with them, but ultimately it's not for us to set targets. When it comes to economic diversification, so there is uncertainty on the direction of travel for greenhouse gas emission reduction in the country. There's also uncertainty around the rate and the extent to which the economy will diversify and it will grow. There are targets for GDP growth that we are taking into account. We are considering these focus sectors that the country wants to develop, but it is uncertain also which sector will become more prevalent. So we've tested different scenarios where we have different rates of greenhouse gas emission reduction, and we have different economic diversification pathways. And what we find is that there are strong implications for climate change policy driven by economic diversification, i.e., depending on which direction the country goes, you will need to plan differently for reducing emissions. So one main recommendation is that the two policies need to be closely related, and planning has got to be done jointly between the two areas. Otherwise, the risk is that cost will be higher for climate change mitigation, and this could also impact, in some respects, the success of economic diversification in sectors that have to be competitive globally. And another striking finding, I mean, this is not surprising for those who are doing similar studies in the region, is the extent to which Qatar, if it continues to grow and if it continues to develop energy-intensive industry in particular, will need to rely on technologies such as carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So the scale of this is mind-boggling. So we're talking about the country looking to develop around 10 million ton per year capacity in the coming years. If the country continues to grow its industry and wants to reduce emissions to the point where it's carbon neutral, it might need to go up to 200 million or more tons per year of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So that's something that also needs to be taken into consideration for planning and investment purposes.
Thank you, Marcello. Dabia, over to you.
So it's on, yeah? Okay, perfect. So in our chapter, we kind of looked, like touching upon a couple of topics that already have been mentioned. We looked into Qatar's role in the energy transition, especially with the LNG expansion first. Currently, you know that the first phase of the expansion will be completed in 2026, 2027, around that time. Already we've seen like there is a lot of commitment and interest from different regions around the world in acquiring LNG. So there seems that there is a trend of growing that of adopting LNG as a transition fuel, despite any climate targets that the countries have set. So there are many clients would be buying LNG from Qatar, including China, there's India, Japan, and the EU, which were potential as well. So in the chapter, we looked over some of the New York announced contracts that were announced by Qatar Energy in the expansion. And then we looked into, okay, what could stop selling that LNG? And in there, the role of emerging technologies come into play. So one thing is, like Diego mentioned, is the role of SMR, so small nuclear reactors that could affect the market for the LNG as a power production facility. It takes less time to install. It can operate pretty quickly, but it's still at the research phase. So that's something that could coming up. Something that Dr. Malchella has been working on as well is hydrogen, and a lot of Qatar LNG importers have already announced hydrogen plants. And we've seen like moves from Qatar on looking into ways of developing blue hydrogen. One of them is the largest combined ammonia, which is with the carbon capture and storage. So they're looking to ammonia as a fuel, as a carrier of hydrogen instead of LNG. And then we looked into a little bit into what did Qatar partners, where our Qatar partners are in the energy transition, and they're in different phases. So, for example, the EU has very strict and announced climate targets, and they've been very clear. However, with the recent conflicts, there has been more need for LNG. So will that continue or not for the, let's say, would they buy Qatari hydrogen, for example? That's a question. Whereas China, they're still developing, and India is still developing, so the demand is growing. So we don't see that there will be a lot of risk there, and I think they will continue importing in terms of, they will continue importing from Qatar, hopefully. So then we assessed into what Qatar have looked into in terms of climate targets. Are they meeting the demands of their future importers? And yes, Qatar did look into a couple of areas through different aspects like the blue ammonia, the carbon capture and storage, but also there has been investments from Qatar Investment Authority in energy, like energy solutions that are decoupled from the hydrocarbons. One of them is the SMR, other are battery technologies. And on the policy side, I think Qatar is one of the few developing countries that are actually giving or has commitment to invest in other developing nations. And one of them was the 2019 announcement by His Highness the Emir of committing $100 million to help small islands and small nations in combating climate change and mitigation, impacts, and adaptation. So that's a little bit about the chapter.
Thank you so much, Tabia. Before we turn to the audience, what I'd like to do is just kind of go through and also get a final reflection from you about a key challenge or key opportunity or key policy that you would communicate to the, not just policymakers, but the community in Qatar interested in the issue of decarbonization and climate mitigation reduction strategies. So, there you go.
Maybe the first reflection would be the fact that we need to treat decarbonization in a holistic way. And as different chapters have been already showcasing, there's no silver bullet to the question or to the challenge. So we really have to tackle the issue from different angles, and not just the supply side, but also the demand side as well. The second, which connects to the specific case of nuclear energy maybe, given the changing dynamics or changing discourse around nuclear energy, and I have to kind of state that in COP28, nuclear energy for the first time was actually included to the official declaration too, in official UN setting as well. So we are seeing a increasing interest in that, but I mean, it doesn't mean that Qatar has to be involved in this discussion at all, but it means that it has to develop strategies and policies to answer this development, which could be igniting further dialogue in the region, coming up with strengthened safety measures, and also heavily investing in human capital. And Qatar is already doing so much on that. Last year in March, Qatar has co-organized an international event on empowering women in the nuclear field. So this was such a good kind of reflection on that. And I think this connects to the final challenge or remark on decarbonization and energy transition overall. If you look at the discussions, we are no longer talking about energy transition. We are talking about people-centered energy transition, just energy transition. And it means bringing in people, and not in a way to kind of raise awareness or changing lifestyle. These also matter, but it's more about investing in green skills, investing in human development. And again, this will be another example from COP, but this year's COP in Baku had, for the first time in COP history, a thematic day dedicated to human development. And we could not stress this enough, and how it is important for the decarbonization, co-designing, bringing local voices, bringing local heritage, and making sure that this discussion or transformation is genuine, coming from the local dynamics. I think that would be the major reflection that I would have for decarbonization in Qatar. Thank you.
Alexandra?
So from a carbon market perspective, for Qatar to be able to use carbon markets effectively and really as a tool to implement its national priorities, carbon markets carbon credits need to be achieve fungibility. That means carbon credits need to be widely accepted and interchangeable across buyers, across standards and national frameworks. Because without this harmonization, we will risk fragmentation in the market, and this fragmentation will lead to reduced liquidity in the market. This is what we are currently seeing. There is huge fragmentation, which does not really attract sufficient interest of investors to use carbon finance as a tool to transform or achieve low carbon development. So really this fragmentation is a challenge, and a tool like the fund that we are currently discussing with Rasmal, because it has a dual investment stream, carbon finance but also equity investment, could support this transition. So we are looking into this to support Qatar to achieve its low carbon development.
Yes, so I would like to again go back to the point of climate change and economic diversification, how they're connected. But this time, say something about something to do with the international dimension and the importance for Qatar to be able to continue to export energy and other commodities. So the conversation we were having, we were in this room yesterday, Dr. Dabia was part of the conversation as well. We were talking about energy transitions, and clearly we all know that over the last few months, in particular, other geopolitical issues have gone up the agenda, and perhaps the energy transition and climate change have somehow had to take a back seat. So this could lead GCC fossil fuel exporting countries to become a bit complacent about the urgency of engaging in the energy transition. But I feel quite strongly about this and feel that, in fact, if anything, this is the time when the GCC and Qatar should keep if you like, the rudder in the same direction, and invest now in technologies that will allow them to gradually diversify their exports towards cleaner fuels, energy vectors, and cleaner commodities, because the The problem of climate change isn't going away just because we are not considering it, as we are distracted by other priorities. And when it will come back, it will probably come back in a more urgent way, which might lead to what is called disorderly transition. In fact, I don't think that the energy transition will ever be orderly, but it's a matter of how disorderly it can get. And this could have a disproportionate impact on the finances of GCC countries if they're not ready. And the GCC countries can get ready. They have the means, they have the financial capacity to plan in advance, and I think that that would be a very smart strategy to follow.
Very insightful comments from my colleagues here. So at the end of the day, energy has to be accessible and has to be feasible, and it's needed for any type of growth. And that kind of explains why people are still using coal, why that's the first thing that goes after the regulation when like a new administration comes into play. And that's a reality that we have to be very aware of. From the discussion yesterday, discussion today, the technology is there. It just has to be with the right deployment. I think the efficiency can get better to a point, but then it would be a systems phase in of the new technologies and phase out of the older technologies. I think there have been also large amount of investments that have been done in like the traditional, like say oil and gas, energy supply chains. We're talking about pipelines, ports, regasification stations, all of these kind of things. This took time to be adopted, and we cannot say that this will change overnight. It will still be in play. So I think the best way, or like the best way to be prepared for the challenge, is to understand that the need will come to do another energy transition. Qatar already went through one. We went from oil to gas. We're ready for the next one. But at the same time, understand that we can get maximum out of sustainable energy export right now.
Perfect. That's a great way to end this discussion or this part of the conversation. Thank you so much. We have about 15 minutes for an engagement from the audience. If you would please, if you have any intervention or question for our panelists, please raise your hands and introduce yourself. Please. What we'll do is probably get maybe three questions and then turn back to the panelists for reflections.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Aziz Rahman. I am an associate professor at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar. So thank you, very engaging, very informative session. My question is that I see some wind turbine here, but in reality, maybe, I don't know, is there in wind turbine or not? So, you indicated that nuclear energy, right? So I did a quick Google search. I find that in terms of energy, wind turbine provides the highest yield, kilowatt hour, in comparison to nuclear. So nuclear is intermediate. Wind turbine and solar provides highest amount of yield. Next is wind turbine. The following, wave energy. Wave energy will yield, the lowest amount. So why not we are considering, what is the benefit? My question is that I'm very impressed listening that, nuclear energy trend. I like the idea, but in terms of yield, how can we, overcome the current problems right now? As well as I would like to know from you, geothermal. Saudi Arabia is talking about geothermal. I attended several conferences. They are ahead of us. Why not Qatar consider low geothermal? I know that Qatar may not have high geothermal gradient underneath. Why not low geothermal? So this is my, questions to the panelists. If you can give us some light on it, that would be great. Thank you so much.
we're going to give maybe 3 questions and then reflect.
Thank you for your interventions. Great presentation. I have a question about the energy transition in Qatar. I feel like we haven't really talked about the bulk of energy transition, which mostly influence decarbonization more than many of the points that had been discussed. And Qatar is unique in the GCC in not having a decarbonization goal. It doesn't want to decarbonize fully by 2050, like Bahrain or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia or Oman or the UAE. Also, Qatar is only 10% renewables at the moment, which is quite low. It did it in one go, jumping from 0 to 10% with one solar plant. But I was wondering, what would you rate the assessment or trajectories, or how do you accelerate that process on the fundamental part of decarbonization, changing the energy systems in the country towards more renewable, non-fossil fuel-based energy systems? Where do you see this going, any of you?
Do you want to plug Carbon?
Karim Al-Genzi. I just founded a think tank that focuses on energy and climate in the Middle East and North Africa.
So let's take 2 more and then turn back to the panelists.
Abdel Fattah Hamid, Global Affairs. Thank you so much for a very informative presentation. So my question is directly to Igor. How would SMR compete with
Abdel Fattah, yeah, keep it farther away.
Okay. So my question is to Doigo. How would SMR compete with the existing gas power infrastructure, and specifically when it comes to the cost, when it comes to the energy efficiency, and also what is the specific technical and economic barrier exists for the SMR deployment in Qatar, given the high temperature and heat, the region? Okay. Okay, so the second question is, what is it?
Thank you. So let's turn back to our panelists, maybe a couple of minutes each.
Maybe I can start with the nuclear. Is it working? Yes, now. With the nuclear question, and thanks for all the questions, of course. I think it's a very important point to raise the renewables dimension as well, because to me at least, for every energy resource, we have to be aware of the pros and cons. And if I were to just vote for a specific energy, if I had a gun on my head and I had to vote for one, that would definitely be the hidden fuel, which is the energy efficiency. So I think all the resources have some advantages and disadvantages. When it comes to the comparisons or discussions between nuclear versus the renewables, the fundamental argument is that nuclear energy is offering the base load, 70-24, good quality of energy for your industry, and that would be could be a complementary resource with the renewables. And I think it's also connected with the fundamental fact that when we are thinking about energy or energy security, we have to think about the basket, the portfolio. So you cannot just rely on renewables, you cannot just rely on coal, nuclear or natural gas. So it's how you are combining them together. So of course, both of them has their pros and cons in that regard. With regards to the current problems about nuclear energy, which would be mainly the waste issue and the risk of accidents, which connects to the human component that is already there. This is something that the industry is hardly aware of, like it's very aware of and working on. Of course, I'm not here to kind of defend the industry, or I'm not coming from a technical background for that, but at least there are some efforts to address that, that dimension. And I think this is how we ended up with this increased progress with SMRs as well, because I think that was like a card of nuclear industry saying that, okay, wait, we might have a solution here to address some of the fundamental problems when it comes to cost, waste, and risks of nuclear energy. With the SMRs, I think this is still an ongoing debate, so I don't have a specific answer to your question, because we see multiple existing designs for SMRs, and we don't know which will be the ultimate quote-unquote winner design, both in terms of economic viability and the construction phases. So it's something that is still ongoing. So as its resilience in high temperatures. And I think this heat factor in the GCC is a factor that should be considered in multiple domains of decarbonization for infrastructure as well, the resilience element. And it is, I can say that, an ongoing debate, and I'm curiously following that debate too. Thank you for your question.
So to respond to your question, Qatar, as we also described in the chapter in the dossier, has two options to participate in carbon markets. It can host and it can export, export, but it can also become a technology provider externally and receive credits. When it comes to hosting projects, there is significant interest, for example, from Japan through the joint crediting mechanism. They are trying to engage strategically with Qatar to access carbon credits hosted by Qatar. They would be a strategic partner. But when it comes to providing investment technology externally, there is significant interest from countries around the world. I mean, we are currently working in DRC, in Tunisia, in Burundi. We were just approached by Nepal, Pakistan. These are all countries eager to engage in Qatar as investor and technology provider. And maybe just quickly to your comment, because what is it? Okay, yeah. No, I just wanted to say something about the energy transition through renewable energy. You mentioned solar and wind, and because hydrocarbons are so low cost here in Qatar, I mean, carbon finance could be really the added value to make this solar energy, wind energy, so all renewable energies financially viable. So carbon markets could help here to achieve or contribute to this transition.
Thank you. Marcelo?
Yes, interesting questions. I wanted to first go to the question on what does it take for Qatar to actually decarbonize. It's not like there isn't a single good answer to this, but I would say that I mean, as we observe around the GCC, there are efforts to decarbonize, particularly in certain sectors, and I would say that the priority is in the oil and gas sector, followed by industry, and this is because the countries of the GCC need to remain competitive when it comes to exporting their fuels, and their fuels are expected to be more and more clean as far as Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are concerned. So there is a market driver there, and there is an incentive for renewable energy and CCS to be used in, particularly in the oil and gas industry. There is a growing driver also for cleaner commodities, petrochemicals and metals and so on, driven by international policy, such as carbon border taxes and so on. So the gradual decarbonization of these sectors is driven by international markets. When it comes to other sectors, such as domestic transport and buildings, it's a different matter because the drivers aren't that strong. So I don't know, so complete decarbonization will need to be driven by other considerations, and they will be really country-specific to a certain extent, and to the ability of the GCC to start playing into some of these industries. For example, electric vehicles is an industry that's been discussed repeatedly over time, and there has been interest from various GCC countries to engage in the value chain, or the electric vehicle value chain. It's not easy, but if a regional electric vehicle industry developed, then that would be a driver for reducing emissions from actually decarbonizing road transport, because reducing emissions from road transport is happening already, but on a much smaller scale. So at least in part, I hope I've answered this question. The other question about wind, well, obviously, renewable energy are very unevenly, if you like, renewable energy resources are very unevenly distributed around the world, and Qatar in particular has very good, not the best, but very good solar energy resources in the region. As far as wind is concerned, there are better places in the region. In Saudi Arabia, in Oman, there are better places. Qatar is not known for very good wind resources. This said, efforts have been made to map wind resources, especially offshore, and we might see some development in the coming years. And that, to the point that my fellow panelists made, we're going to need all solutions. Okay, not all of them will be equally attractive from an economic perspective, but those that are attractive enough will be needed, because the amount of energy required going forward is only going to grow in this region, and no single solution can answer the question.
Perfect. Thank you, Marcelo. Davia?
Yeah, just to add a little bit for Dr. Aziz's question, I think on geothermal, I think Qatar, if you go under the ground with a few layers, it gets cooler. So I'm not sure or aware about the efficiency. I think Saudi would have a better efficiency because of the geographical, say, diversity that they have within their own country. So I believe it will rank lower in terms of renewable deployment. Again, for the point that Diego mentioned, for power, you need stability. So wind was not that stable as well. It was very low potential. Dr. Marcello touched on that. But I think SMR can give stability like what fossil fuels could do, because they can operate continuously. It has a little bit disadvantage, it's just the startup time. In terms of decarbonization, the decarbonization target that Qatar had was 25% reduction this year, 2030, right? So I would give them more credit than they're willing to admit. Actually, they're doing a lot of decarbonization efforts. So you can see that there is a lot more electric cars that are happening in terms of, are deployed on the road. And again, it's because cost effective. It is more available. You have more dealerships. It's very easy to put a charger in your home, and you get it for free, because electricity is free for Qataris, and then it's very subsidized for the rest of the country. So it's cheap. It became deployable because of that. So the answer is like that. They actually came about it from an economic perspective. And you can look at it in different angles. Like right now, they announced a new petrochemical facility for polypropylene production. And then through that, Qatar Energy had a localized production of caustic soda that is needed for the production of the polyethylene. And that used to be imported from India. So they reduced the emission and by removing that shipping element, by localizing the production and giving more element of actually recycling some of the products back. So they're doing more in terms of circularity and the solutions that are coming out economically. Most of the industry, if you look at the facilities in terms of oil and gas production and then petrochemical productions, are at the standard best available technologies. Due to the high humidity in Qatar, there is a lot of risk of corrosion, which is happening. So they ended up upgrading their plants pretty frequently. And whenever they upgrade for the best technology again. And if you can check on their website, they announce these kind of like partnerships. So they are using the best available energy efficient technologies, and you are kind of doing a lot of emission reduction through that, again, to economic reasons that are coming about. So if we would truly look into Qatar and say the effort of what they've done in terms of decarbonization, going down into the industry, what it's doing, and the commitment that they're doing abroad, I would put them, I would say, in a really good chance among the best developing, best nations around the GCC with the decarbonization. It's just not communicated that way.
Thank you so much, Tabia. And I think with this we're wrapping up. I'd like to very much thank Earthna, especially Muaz and his team for hosting us and helping us put together this excellent panel discussion, and for the dossier, Suzanne, Qais, Tina, Mustafa, and our comms team for helping put this event together. Muhammad, Francoise, very much for helping us edit and translate the document and the dossier. All the chapters are available online. Please scan this to access them. And finally, most importantly, for the excellent contributions of the authors, both those in our panel today and those who contributed to the dossier that you can read. So please join me in thanking everyone with our panel. And we'll continue the conversation during this afterwards, and then the summit. Thanks, everyone. Take care.